Pac-12 folks and Big 12 folks continue to dig their heels in, whether it's online, whether it's in the reporting about the future of both leagues, the potential for the Big 12 to pick up some Pac-12 schools, Pac-12's bid to stay alive and try to get a new television contract, kind of the way that we look at these things and how we should feel about them. I'm not going to tell you guys how to feel about them. I'll talk about how I feel about them, how it's different for each person, and why this entire conversation really is more complicated than we want the Big 12 to succeed, and we just need their teams. That's coming up on today's show.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Make sure you guys subscribe. Right now, we've got plenty of momentum. We are currently above 3,900 subscribers. Our goal by the end of April, 4,000. Help us get there. Tell your friends. I appreciate all of you send messages saying just discovered your show, all that kind of stuff. It's great. We love to hear that. Episode with David Smoke of 365 Sports is up from yesterday's show. Check that out. Show about Colorado is from earlier in the week too. There's some other stuff, just happening. Andrew Marchand will be on the show next week. We hope. I texted Andrew today. He said he's away right now, but he said hopefully I can come on next week, and says there's a lot of news happening. I hope I can get on. I hope I can give you some time. So we hope to have Andrew Marchand from the New York Post on next week. Make sure you all follow us on Twitter at LOBig12. You guys can find me at Josh Neighbors _ is my Twitter account. Find us also wherever you get your podcasts. Today's show brought to you all by the FanDuel Sportsbook, too, America's #1 sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are here, play-ins at least right now. Great game last night. Heat, underdogs, or as favorites, not doing very well. They didn't last night. Lakers get a big win. They did not cover 108-102. So 2 dogs covering last night in the opening rounds. You guys can bet on that at FanDuel Sportsbook. All right, so today's show, not really talking about news, reacting to new news, but talking about the way people are reacting to the news, how we react, what we say, and everything. And I thought about this for a few reasons. Number one, I've been reading tweets from folks going back and forth. I've also been reading, comments from other folks in the space, reporters and whatnot, and just thinking about this conversation kind of at large. And also my conversation with Spencer McLaughlin the other day, some of the comments that I've seen from that. And, I think there is a narrative right now that Big 12 folks are obsessive about the Pac-12 TV situation. And I would agree. Like we have, as far as this show goes, it takes up a lot of our time as of late. I kind of want to explain the reasons for that, like why this show focuses so much time on it. And here's my number one reason for this is that, and this kind of all ties together. The number one reason is this is the future of college football and potentially college basketball, very likely college basketball, on the line as we speak right now. The complexion of that is going to change. And here's what I mean. Whatever happens next with the Pac-12, if they lose the Four Corner schools, if they lose Oregon and Washington, the conference might fold up, but also it could exist in a different form. And whatever happens, like there could be, different numbers, whatever happens there. Oregon and Washington just leave, they pick up 2 more. 2 of the Four Corner schools leave, they pick up 2 more from somewhere else. Well, the college football playoff is going to expand to 12 teams. In the last couple years, we're talking about a situation where there are 12 teams. The Big 12 schools, the Big 12 would have gotten 2 teams in most likely. The Pac-12 probably could have gotten 2 teams in this last time around as well. But that probably changes, that math. They probably still get an automatic qualifier. But getting a second team in does become more difficult. Also, a further consolidation, a big conference getting knocked out. And once again, I think the Pac-12 is still a Power 5 league, but the Pac-12 kind of goes down. I think that would definitely be necessitated by Oregon and Washington going to a different place, most likely the Big 10. That just further perpetuates what's happening right now in college sports with the conference getting larger. And also the Big 12 picking off more schools. That would start to look like a super conference. We're at 12 right now. If you add 2 more, you're at 14. And I don't think they just add 2. I think they're looking to keep growing and growing larger, building the portfolio as a business kind of. in some ways. And so, the future of the sport and also college basketball too, not to mention that's a whole other can of worms, is at stake. The future of the Big 12, as I mentioned, is directly tied to this. Directly tied to this because we know the Four Corner schools have been in contact with the Big 12. Whether they have been admitting, to what degree they've kind of been different admitting it, either quiet or saying no or saying yes. They have been in contact. We know that is true. And so that is clearly interesting. So every single piece of news goes into that. Also, the Big 12 just went through something similar, losing two massive brands in OU and Texas. They're going to have their last year coming up here very soon. And so the Big 12 just went through this very same process. And so I think by that token, as Big 12 fans and as a Big 12 media member, you're drawn to that. You are drawn to that conversation. You're drawn to that because you just went through that. And also there's a chance that Big 12 might poach some of those teams. So like it all kind of is intertwined. Also, the last thing is too, and it's not saying clickbait, you all care because I see the viewership and the listenership numbers are very good for the shows that focus on the Pac-12, television deal and where they are, because you all know it affects your schools, the conference that you're a fan of. Whether it's Pac-12 fans coming to watch these shows or Big 12 fans, this channel has grown very much so because of conference realignment. When this channel really started to pick up on YouTube, especially, you guys can go back and look. It was last July. It wasn't even the Big 12 stuff. It was the talk about USC and UCLA that really drove our growth. And so that's why we talk about it, is because it's brought a lot of you new fans to the table. And when we do talk about hoops, so we do talk about football and all those other things, you all are paying attention there. But you guys really care about this because I think we all kind of agree together. The business of college football mostly and college sports in general right now is so interesting because we've taken the full turn. We are fully talking about a business now. This is a business. The sport is a business. We are getting businessmen coming in to run the conferences like Brett Yormark. We have schools, making upwards, conferences making over $1 billion a year in television revenue. This is a business. It's always been a business, but it's become more so of a business recently than it has been in years. It's just been accelerated. More CFP expansion, conferences realigning, television contracts, NCAA tournament expansion, all of these things. It's just more money. And that's what this is all about now. It's the business. We're all kind of wondering, where is this all headed? And I think too, like our anxiety is about, hey, in the end of this, like where actually are we headed together? Are we headed to a space where it's, Premier League? Are we heading towards a 20-team table? Top 4 teams playing a CFP, and bottom 3 teams get relegated, and there's a league below that. All of those things, like it's there. That could happen. And the reason why I say this is totally real, like Greg Sankey talked about it recently, and recently read, I think it was a couple years ago, read the book about the Premier League. I forgot which book it was, but was really interested in that. And that is something that we've all mentioned as it feels like it's something in the future. That is why everybody cares about this. We're all interested to see because it shapes this. College football is a massively popular sport. And so we all care about the business right now because the business is what's most interesting about it. Georgia just wins back-to-back titles. It's super interesting. It's very intriguing. TCU, great story and all of this. But this isn't just about one season. This is about all of the seasons to come. And if you're a Kansas State fan and you want to see your team make a championship and potentially win a championship, you want to make sure, whatever happens with all this stuff, it kind of furthers Kansas State's interest. We'll get to that in a second, but it's because we all have an interest. We all have something at stake here. It's not just obsessing over just to obsess over, being like, we can't stop talking about the Pac-12. We love the Pac-12, and like, that's not really what's happening here. What's happening here is the interest in the future of the sport. It's not like the Pac-12 is not like this girl that we're all obsessed over, and we're like, oh, you guys just can't stop talking about us. Well, yeah, because we might take some of your teams. If you're a Big 12 person, you might say that. Like that's kind of the whole thing here. And so it kind of gets me to my next point about like, what do you all, the fan, want? What do I want? And so I'll say this. I'm not saying I want the Pac-12 to collapse. There's a part of me, a very large part of me, that loves the way football has been, college football has been. I miss the days of the Big East, and in fact, they had a cool conference, a lot of fun teams. I miss the Big 12 having OU in Texas. We're going to miss that. I wish UCLA and USC were staying in with that conference. I wish everybody could have their little corner of the world, get their slice of the pie, and we could all have fun with this sport and kind of further together. But we're not past it anymore. The problem is that conference games are going to begin to look like bowl games, right? What's cool about the bowl games is that at the end of the year, you get to play an opponent you don't normally play. Same thing with the NCAA tournament. Well, yeah, it's gonna be weirder now. And as opposed to a Big Ten versus a Pac-12 bowl game. Yeah, no, we're gonna get USC and Michigan, during the year. We're gonna get USC, Rutgers, UCLA, Indiana. Like all that stuff's gonna start happening during the year. So how special those games are and whatnot, they become less special. That is totally true. But that's the way the sport's going. And as much as I, yearn and pine, like many of you, for the days where kind of everybody was equal, and it feels like this 12-team playoff could have just come and we could all had our normal conferences, and the AAC could have been involved, and the Sun Belt could have been involved. I mean, they will because of the 6 automatic qualifiers, but who knows how long that's even going to exist for. And so, while there's this 12-team playoff coming and is definitely more inclusive, the way conferences are heading implies that there might be exclusivity on the horizon. And so that's why I want, I want conferences to still be around. I want there to be more balance. I wish that was the case, but there's not. So we're past that. So it's almost like that part of me that wishes for it is going to go out the window. There's a part of me, though, that really wants the Big 12 to succeed. And part of that is the anxiety of what we went through before, but part of that also is because it's the conference I cover, and I would love to bring new teams in. I love to see this thing grow bigger. So, this show grows bigger, the conference grows bigger. We all have more fun together, and the Big 12 can become a bigger part of the conversation with more teams, right? And they're bringing teams in from the West Coast. They're bringing teams up a level. And look, came out of a situation that we all didn't want to happen, but the Big 12 is making these moves because they had to, with what happened. And so that is where we are. That's the reality of it. So that part where it's pulling and saying, Josh, didn't you love watching Pac-12 football and versus? Don't you love what we get from these games every single year? That it feels like every conference does have a say and every conference matters. And it's cool that the Pac-12 is going to get bigger and the CFPs can get bigger. And so everybody still keeps on mattering more and more. Yeah, I like that. But that's not the way this thing's going to work. Unfortunately, it feels like, at least at this point. Maybe we regress back the other way, but I think we're past the point of no return on this. And so, personally, that's where it's like, yeah, I'm not cheering for the Pac-12 to go away. That's not my intent with all of this. Do I think that it's a difficult move for a lot of these schools? Yes. Do I think it's the right move now at this point for a school like Colorado and Arizona? Sure. I mentioned this last night, though, and I was talking about this in the Locked On Cougs podcast with Parker, and I said, if you're Utah, it's actually probably better off if they stay in the Pac-12 right now. Why? Because in the most important sport, football, they're doing a good job, and also basketball, it's reasonable they could become competitive pretty quickly, and so they're beating opponents they know, and they're beating big programs. Like they beat Oregon twice 2 years ago. They beat Washington, or they beat USC twice last year with Lincoln Riley and that high-flying offense. They crushed them the second time around. And they're doing so well at this point in time. Do I think hey, there's a conversation about this might expand your footprint if you go to the Big 12 recruiting and whatnot? Yeah, there definitely is. But I understand their desire to have success. I think they'll have a lot of it right now with where they are in the Pac-12. They continue to have success there. And once again, for basketball, it'll be much easier for them to get a very good men's basketball program in that conference, just because the depth right there is not there, I should say, now for the Pac-12. And so, that's where it goes to it's a conversation for all of it. I'm not just out here telling you folks, everybody should come here. We're better than them. We're offering something more. No, every single time in the argument, I've said, look, there's not much security in the Pac-12 right now. Tough to keep Oregon and Washington, who think they should be competing for championships, and I think they should be too, at least in the conversation for it. Those schools, I just don't know why they would commit long-term to something with the Pac-12 when they know that they're going to have to take a massive gap. when it feels like there is an opportunity for them to potentially at some point in time in the near future go to the Big Ten. So they have to kind of figure that out, And also for the Big 12, when it comes to the other schools, we're talking about, hey, look, like if you all leave, that conference becomes weakened. And if that conference is weakened, then when our television deal is up next time around, we are offering games in all these time slots. We'll see where streaming is, but we already have the in with ESPN and Fox, which looks like the Pac-12 is kind of losing right now. The Big 12 is as an in with ESPN and Fox at a pretty decent price as well. You can come be a part of that. And when it's time for the next TV deal, you can feel pretty confident about our status compared to the Pac-12 because they've lost teams and they've lost some important members and have to try to fill those if they want to stay alive. And who the hell knows what happens with Oregon and Washington. You feel more confident about the ground you're standing on. It's not really shifting sands as much as the Pac-12 would be. And so that's why I make the argument for some of those schools to leave and to go elsewhere. It just kind of makes sense. You can get on the security and also the next television deal. You like your chances because you won't get Big Ten money. You won't get SEC money, but the Pac-12 is the next conference you're competing with because guess what? The ACC doesn't go to market until 2036. So the next television deal, potentially the next one after that, the kind of other leagues that aren't the top two, you're on par with. Monetarily, you're on par with, and you have a chance to surpass them money-wise and create a really good situation. If you're thinking about if I'm not thinking about Arizona or Oklahoma State in context of Michigan, just as a school itself, like this is a chance to better your school's situation, it feels like. And that's why I believe some of those schools should make the move. Is it a hard move? Yes. Is it a risk? Yes. I'd say a risk in terms of like public perception and just adjustment and your athletic success. It's a risk, but it's a move that feels like it's worth making right now. And so that is where we are, I think, on that front is that I wish college football didn't change, but I want the Big 12 to do well. And it sucks it has to be at the potential expense of a bunch of fan bases that do care, like Washington State and Oregon State. But that is the business because the Big 12 was in a position where they got gutted. And, Oklahoma and Texas made the move and we had to deal with it. And so we picked apart the AAC. And that's how this thing works at this point. Somebody has to lose. And I hate that it's that way. Quick word from our sponsors before I talk about, what individual fans want, what you all should want out there. Today's show is brought to you all by the FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. Go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn today. When you guys do that, what you all have the opportunity to do is you guys can use FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get yourself $1,000 up to $1,000 back on your first bet if it misses. So FanDuel.com/LockedOn, America's #1 sportsbook. Go there today and check that out. All right. So what should you all the fans want? If you're a fan of a Texas Tech, if you're a fan of Kansas State, Iowa State, I have maintained this the whole time. You most likely want these new schools to come because try to think about it like this. West Virginia might be the only school that doesn't want them to come. UCF's just happy to be here at this point, but West Virginia does not want to travel more than they already do. But this is the reality now. It's kind of to suck that up. Maybe BYU is like, I don't really want to add Utah because we're the Utah school right now. And to be honest, Utah football has been a little bit better than BYU in the last couple of years. Maybe that's the case. Maybe some of the other new schools are feeling like, well, kind of the new shine wears off us if there's new teams coming. Sure, maybe that's the case too, but really like this just strengthens the conference. And I think once again, makes the next TV deal much more, I think it makes it a more lucrative one because of what they're offering across the board. And so if you're a fan of those schools, like I think long-term, you do want more of these schools because you now become a much more of a voting block, if you will. Right. I mean, you're going to have a bunch of schools that like, you can't talk about college football without Baylor and TCU and Utah and Colorado, maybe under Dion, right? And I mean, the story of college football in the last 5-10 years can't be talked about without UCF and Cincinnati. Like the more assets you have, the better off you are when I think the eventual time comes when it's like, all right, we're just going to, we're doing the college ball super league thing. We can't just count out the Big 12 because there's just too many important teams there. Are they Michigan? Are they, TCU beat Michigan. Are they Ohio State? Are they Georgia? Are they Alabama? No, but there are enough significant schools that do things like play in Rose Bowls, play in New Year's Six Bowls, win those bowl games, that they should not be counted out of this. That's what those fans should want. And I think it's totally fair for Big 12 fans to want to, lack of a better term, gut the big Pac-12, but like, it doesn't need to be this, mean thing where we're angry at people on Twitter and whatnot. Like, if you get into it with a Washington State fan, guys, just remember, they just want to be playing football at a high level. They, like you, want their sports to matter. They want to feel like they've got a shot. And, it's not a guarantee. And it feels like anymore the way things are shifting, although the 12-team playoff still feels like it gives a lot of opportunity. But like the monetary changes, it's going to make it really challenging. So that's what everybody really wants. They just want their chance to compete. And so that's why I think, like, if you want to draw ire at anybody, it is George Kliavkoff for making comments like, we haven't decided if we're going to shop there yet. Right. It is kind of the attitude they've had towards, the Big 12. Maybe some of the schools have towards Big 12 schools, but it's not about the fans. You should not be mad at the fans as much as you might fight with them on Twitter. I think to me, like, I have a tough time reading stuff from John Canzano where it's like, it's basically doing his readers a disservice to act like everything's fine. It is like the fire burning meme. And this is not personal with John Canzano. Like, when I worked the Pac-12 channel at Sirius, I was fine with everything, but I just think it's disingenuous to be like, some Pac-12 folks think they'll get more than the Big 12. It's like, what, maybe they do, but like, what is that? And floating like Colorado State's an option, but it's much more of a Big 12 fit. The Big 12 is not talking about Colorado State right now. It's not happening. What are you floating that? It's like, they're better off, over there, acting like everything is just fine. Saying things like as Pac-12 deal nears, backing up the deadline all the time. It just feels like we know what he's pushing for. And look, I've got the Big 12 flag behind me. I'm a bit more transparent with all of this. I cover the conference. Once again, I didn't attend a school in the conference. I've covered the league since I was at Sirius, started the podcast a couple years ago. I love the sport as a whole. All right. I went to a Big 12 school that I wish was still in the Big 12. Like, as much money as Missouri has, I wish Missouri was still in the Big 12. I think they fit there much better. I wish they were still there. And so, like, I have an affinity for this league. I still have an affinity. I grew up watching. I was born in San Francisco. I grew up, watching. I didn't live there for too long, but I watched, Deshaun Jackson growing up on Versus, and I watched Stanford upset USC late night on Versus, and I watched Dennis Dixon and all these guys. Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush. Those guys are moving on to go to a different place, but like, there's a place in my heart for the Pac-12. I loved watching what's his face. Who was a kid, the quarterback for, the quarterback for Arizona a few years ago. I forgot his name. Watch Brock Osweiler growing up. Enjoyed, there is a place for everybody in this sport on television, in primetime games, playing everybody. I think there's a spot for everybody. Problem is, like, this is where the sport is trending. And so, I'm pretty honest about I just laid it out for you all. Part of me wants Pac-12 to survive, to be like, yeah, there is still a balance of power and everybody's got a shot. But also part of me wants the Big 12 to thrive more. And that part of me is probably the bigger part of me that wants to get more schools. But I can't act like there's not a small part of me that's thinking, oh man, why can't we just have it the way it was? But it's not the way it is anymore. So, I think your all's iron, and I'm not saying take it out on people on Twitter on John Canzano, but like, just recognize where everybody's coming from this. For John Canzano, it's most likely coming from a place, while I think it's disingenuous, it's coming from a place like, this is his livelihood. He covers the Pac-12, man. And so, like, you're worried about his that's the way I was worried about my future as well. It's been great for business right now, but think about in the end, guys, like, where this ends. If the Pac-12 is going away, it's tough for business. And I'm sure John will get a job. He's very talented and very good at what he does. But, it's challenging, and it's sad, and it's tough to watch, like a conference that you cover and love potentially go by the wayside. So I think we need to have a little bit more empathy for everybody out there. Just so that if anybody gets defensive, it's more because of a place of like love, trying to protect what they are, because it's tough, guys. It is tough to deal with the sport changing as much as it is. It was really difficult to watch TCU get cracked by Georgia. And what that was, we talked about it so much afterwards, was like, there is a gap that we just cannot bridge in this conference. And oh my God, how are we going to do it? And oh my God, how are we going to freaking do this thing when the money gap gets bigger? I had no answers. But my best answer was, could we model a program like Clemson? That's like my best answer I have. And I don't know how to do it. I mean, I'm 26 years old, so it's not my expertise area, but like, I'm thinking like, damn, how do you do that? It's not easy to do. I mean, it's possible, but it's not easy to do. And so that's where I'm in with all of this. So just out there, yeah, if you're a Big 12 fan of K-State or Iowa State and you want the conference to expand, sure, I'm with you mostly, but like, we don't have to be mean about it on Twitter and just, if, Pac-12 people clap back at you. It's out of the, like, same thing for Spencer McLaughlin. Like, look, you might talk yourself into more stuff because of your position. He goes, I think something changed the Pac-12 deal because the presidents act like they were close and it didn't happen. No, I don't think anything changed, y'all. I just think that they didn't have a deal. I don't think there was ever a deal going to happen for them. I thought they might be closer-ish to one, but I think they were just out there putting a front on. All this stuff, you have to understand why people act the way they do, and don't just be angry at them for it. All right, that'll do it for today's show. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at LOBig12. You guys can find me at JoshNeighbors_. Find the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, also YouTube as well. Like the video, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel as well. Till next time, my friends, as always, stay safe.